Hello everyone, in this video let's review a game that I played recently against Hamza Arain from Pakistan. Now Hamza is rated in the mid 1150s and I thought this would be a good game to showcase some of the openings and the opening mistakes that are possible. Let's jump in and start reviewing right away. I'm playing white in this game and I start with the king pawn opening. My opponent responds with e5. I move my knight to f3, immediately attacking the pawn, and my opponent responds with knight to c6. I now bring my bishop to c4, pressuring the pawn on f7. And here my opponent plays a questionable move by bringing the knight to d4. I pressure the knight by moving my pawn to c3. My opponent chooses to take my knight on f3 and give a check. I take with my queen. Now I'm putting extra pressure on this pawn f7. My opponent responds by moving the pawn up to f6. I think that this move illustrates a slight mistake by my opponent because my opponent should have blocked the attack on the pawn by moving the knight to f6 instead. Anyway, I continue by castling to bring my rook into the action. And at this point, my opponent plays a slightly dubious move by moving his bishop to c5. I pressure the bishop right away, and the reason for doing so is I want to play a tactic which will become evident in the next move. My opponent takes, and this allows me to play the move that I played next. I move my queen to h5 and give a check, at the same time attacking his bishop on c5. The only way my opponent can block my check is by moving the pawn up or by moving his king. In both cases, I should be able to take the bishop and be a piece up. My opponent moves the pawn to g6 and I happily take the bishop. My opponent takes my pawn and this allows me to bring my knight into the action. I take with the knight. My opponent threatens my queen with d6. And I move my queen to d5, putting even more pressure on this diagonal. My opponent plays the move knight to e7, allowing me to move my queen to f7 and give a check. My opponent brings the king to d7. I take the free pawn. My opponent goes c6. I pressure the pawn on d6 by moving my bishop to f4. My opponent threatens my white bishop by moving the pawn to d5, but I ignore the threat and give a check with my queen on d6. And when my opponent moves away, I just take the queen. Note that my white bishop is still under attack. So I take it with my pawn. My opponent takes. I take with my knight. My opponent moves the knight to c6. And here I move my rook to the open file e. I attack my opponent's white bishop. My opponent attacks my bishop and knight with the rook. And I protect my knight with the move bishop to g5, also threatening to give a check on the next move. My opponent moves the pawn to h6, threatening my bishop, which is giving the check. I ignore the threat and take the white bishop with my knight, because if the opponent captures my bishop, with his pawn, then he's going to lose his rook. So my opponent takes the knight with his king. I now move my bishop back to e3. My opponent moves the king to c7. I take the free pawn on h6. My opponent threatens the bishop by moving the rook to h8. I simply move back while also giving a check. My opponent plays a slightly dubious move by moving the king to a white square d7, allowing me to bring my rook into the game. So I go d1 check. My opponent moves back and I go e6 checkmate. So I would say this was a clinical game by me, but this win would not have been possible had my opponent not moved the pawn ahead to f6 and after that not moved the bishop to c5, allowing me to give a check with the queen and take the bishop. I hope you enjoyed this short review of the game against Hamza Arain from Pakistan, rated 1157. If you have any comments about how I could have played differently at different moments in the game, be sure to let me know and be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.